currently in the world are you?
I'm in Tucson, Arizona at home.
So you're living there now.
Yeah, so I just got back last night, but you live here in the winters.
Okay, that seems much more reasonable than Anchorage.
Yeah, I really like it. I like the sun. It's good.
Yeah, does that help with more time to get spent on the bike, spent outside doing those
Totally.
type of refilling things?
Totally.
Well, I guess we'll lean right in, man. First, thank you so much. Really excited to get a chance to talk to you. My show, Not Dead Yet. Um, I'm kind of drawn to people who've decided to spend their life chasing passion and chasing purpose over things and the fitting into what the normal rules of what we've been told equal success and happiness. Whereas I find that it comes from the effort more than it comes from the collecting of things. And so I'm currently training to do a weird endurance thing. Um, and so I'm talking to people who know more than I do. My first endurance thing I did was last year. I did a 18-mile trail run in Bryce Canyon. This is all post total knee replacement and some other stuff. Shifting gears from a former athletic career as a Highland Games athlete, if you're familiar with that silly sport. Now I'm playing around doing some endurance stuff, and at the end of the month, I'm taking on a 240-mile one-day attempt
Wow. On the bike.
on the bike. Yeah,
Cool.
so full gravel bike. It's a best case scenario. Like the Katy Trail across Missouri in
Yeah.
240 miles will knock out maybe less than 100 feet of elevation.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
Yeah,
It's gonna be awesome.
yeah,
That's a
really looking forward to it.
yeah, that's gonna be super cool.
So you now somehow do this for a living. This has now somehow become a job, which is a thing that shouldn't be a job when I was growing up.
It definitely was not. I mean, I can't believe it's a job for me now. I am thrilled. I've been riding since 2008. I started riding across the country and then traveling the world, just as an inexpensive way to get around. And then ended up racing and, was working two jobs to make that happen. And then ended up turning that into something that I do for a living, which is incredible. So I'm super thrilled. But yeah, I never thought this would happen.
Yeah, yeah, same. I mean, interesting times of social media and what they are and content creation and being able to make your own avenue in life. I don't know that the opportunity's ever been better.
Yeah.
Um, so I know that you've done, I guess for my audience who will be much less familiar with you than I am, you want to run through what this year has looked like for you. It's not even worth going back crazier than that right now.
Yeah, sure. That's actually makes it a lot easier for me. So
Yes.
this year, I've basically been on the road since April. So I started April with the Arizona Trail, and I went out to break the record on that. So it's a 800 and I guess at this point, like 830-mile hiking trail across the state.
Okay, so it's not a bike route.
Top border. No, it's designed for walking. But the
Great.
special thing about it is that you're actually allowed to ride it. You're allowed to have a bike, which means sometimes you're riding and sometimes you're pushing. It travels through the Grand Canyon. So for that stretch, 24 miles, you have to put your bike onto a backpack and carry it through.
So you have to, in the middle of that, do the rim to rim hike
Yep.
with your bike on your back.
Exactly, because legally your wheels can't touch the ground. You can't push and roll it. You definitely can't ride it. It's not wilderness, but it's a special land designation where you're
Them's
not
the
allowed to
rules.
bike. Yeah, that's a rule.
Yeah,
So
that's
part
a
of
rule. I get it.
this beast of a trail. And I live in Arizona now, and I've been my first attempt on this trail was in 2015, and I had to quit. I had severe breathing problems. So I always had this on my mind that I wanted to go back and go after this record. And this spring I got to do it. So that's what really started my bike season. I'd done a few other things. I run a girls program in Arizona where I get them ready for a bike adventure. I'd race 24 hours of Old Pueblo. I'd done a few events, but that all felt like kind of home time. And then I started the season with the Arizona Trail, immediately went to Spain after that, hosted a women's bike packing rally,
Oh,
raced 900 miles in Catalonia, and then just continued to race through the season. So after that, it was a race of 900 miles down the Balkans. So Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Montenegro. Immediately from there, flew to Kenya to race migration gravel race where the Maasai warriors live. And there's a huge wildebeest migration from there to Iceland, from Iceland back to Alaska, and then back to Europe. So it's just been pretty nonstop all over the world.
oh, is
I've got
this?
two more races this year still too. So I'm just, I'm kind of running on fumes, but I
Yeah, I
love what I
bet
get
you
to
are, dude.
do.
Man, what I remind myself in times like that is there'll be a point when I don't get to do this.
Exactly.
Like I know it's coming, right? And so like fuck man, while we're here on the gas.
Exactly, and it's also part of this too is like this sport that I do is bike packing. It's self-supported. So basically you put a sleeping bag and what you need on your bike, and then you start from point A and cover a route. And the route's an adventure. It could be through the forest, through the desert, on dirt, on trail, on some road. And then along the way you have to find food and water, places to sleep. Whoever gets to the end first wins.
Now,
Uh,
how
it's
set is the route, or is it like point A to point B and you kind of pick your own adventure?
There are some different versions, but usually it's a very set route. So the way we do this is the races, we share GPX tracks that have turn-by-turn navigation, and then you upload that onto a Wahoo or a GPS that you can follow, or your phone, and then follow the route along the way. And that's really the only rule, is that you actually have to ride the route.
Is that
But there
just a
aren't any
safety
like
measure as well
signs
of
that,
like being able
with
to
that.
keep it's safety measure as well? I'm sure just being able to keep track of people involved.
Well, that's another unit. So we have satellite devices that show our location every 5 minutes. So people can see where you are as well. So you have one to follow where you're going to go, and then people can see where you are along the way.
So for the ride that I've got coming up, part of the fun of it for us is creating the content around it. So like I've got my support team. I'm riding it with a friend, Hannah, who's done some other endurance stuff. She rode around Iceland. I think she did it 8 days or something like that. Rode
What's your
and
last
ran.
name?
Hannah Eden.
Okay, cool. Very
Uh,
cool.
she's she's rad, super stud. From friend of mine from London, and she's gonna do it with me. So this big 1 day, just let it rip. And we've got best case scenario of support from my team and filming it and doing all this, and the challenge of getting all the production parts in line of like how do we film this part and doing that and test running it. I love that whole side of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, man, I love that that's now a thing people get to share. And not coming from endurance and coming from really a strength background and a much quicker sport, it's
Mm-hmm.
been interesting to see how time changes on events like this. And like even in the training, for me being this new to it, I've never had to do anything for 12 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, man, time really gets weird. And for damn sure, those days don't blend in.
Yeah, you remember things. You remember the time you spent out there. That's one of the most special things about this sport for me, is that, yeah, I mean, yeah, you think, oh, you don't sleep, but if you don't sleep, you see a lot, especially if you're outside. So I'm awake riding before the sun rises every day. I see that beauty. I see the sunset every day. In between, it's like in the night, I see animals that I wouldn't see during the day. So there is like such a positive side to these hardships.
Well, I think discomfort is something that's just been discredited a lot. I mean,
Hmm.
damn sure if you want to make a bed that, I mean, I've complained plenty of nights about sleeping on a very nice mattress I own when I've slept very nice, very great in the woods on days I'm tired.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's because I didn't do enough.
Yeah, or that because you like endure discomfort, there's like something special that happens.
Well, it's adaptation, right? Like,
Mhm.
I think no different than the strength training stuff, that if I want my body to adapt to it, I have to stress it enough that it has to make a change because of what we're going to run into in the future.
Mhm.
And why would my endurance training, or why would my emotional stuff, or why would my own personal development be any different? Like, unless I'm kind of pushing those edges to see where I really am and having more awareness, then why would I develop it?
Right. Yep, that totally makes sense to me. And I've never done any strength training, but that's a really great way to relate, is that, if you don't push yourself in these ways, then how are you gonna grow?
Right.
And then, like, yeah, along that line of discomfort, of course, there are gonna be unpleasant moments, but that's not the overwhelming takeaway, because
No.
actually you forget about the pain. It might be really important in those moments, but then a week later you're like, "Well, it wasn't really that bad." I mean, discomfort is different than like serious risk or like serious injury. It's just something you have to realize, like, is this something I can deal with? Is it worse and I should stop? Or is it something I can live with and then like recover later?
Right.
So yeah, totally.
Now, through all those times of like, man, so one of the things I love about people, and the friend that connected us was Rebecca Rush.
Mhm.
But Rebecca introduced herself as an adventurer, and I've never felt more like, oh, that's the best title ever. And so I'm enamored by people who do it, who
Mhm.
I feel like are these capable humans, and you being one, like the Great Divide Trail, right? Like this giant effort all the way through. That's a weird thing for you to kind of know some of the route by heart, I imagine, when you're doing it, of like, oh, we've been here before.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Great Divide is a mountain bike route from Canada to Mexico, and I've raced it 4 times, and I'm gonna do it again,
You're
and
gonna do it again.
it's 2,700 miles, uh, and it's really, but the thing that I, like, go back to is that it's actually, like, I feel like most anybody that wants to could do that. It's not technical riding, it's not scary mountain biking, it's not extremely remote, there's a lot of public land, like, it's very beautiful, it's a really good route, it's something that I recommend to people if they wanna try this style of riding, where they carry their gear and go out somewhere and camp out and go to town and get burgers and, spend some time out there. So I like that. Always like going back to that route because I do think it's accessible. I feel like I want other people to, and that was a huge motivation for me to make a video about my ride on it, was that I want other people to know that this is something they can do. I'd already ridden it twice. I'd ridden down from Alaska, where I'm from, twice. But to go back,
Which is
and
crazy to begin with. It's like
yeah, it's
that's how you get to start it. You're
crazy.
like, oh, we'll just warm up on the way in.
Yeah, I that made sense to me. I was like, I can
Sure.
ride to start through Canada. I'll be used to my bike. I'll be mentally prepared. I'll know what I need, and I'll be in shape. I'll be ready to sit on my bike for 20 hours a day or whatever I need to do. So it was my preparation to like prepare for the race. It was also this incredible adventure to see how my state connects to the rest of the US. I'd never driven it. I'd never traveled that land. Growing up, we always just flew right over. So, it's my chance to kind of see that connection.
Yeah,
Uh,
Banff's as far north as I've been able to road trip, and we've been up to Alaska a few times. We went up to Anchorage and did a trip earlier this year, and I went to Palmer a few years back, competed in a world championship, and it's a cool state, man.
yeah.
It has an interesting vibe to it that I can't. It's like Anchorage and around it. I have a feeling that the people there are happy not to be found.
Some are. There are definitely some people that go to Alaska so nobody will find them or know where they
Right?
are, and they can do whatever they want
Yeah.
without any kind of restriction or repercussion. But for me, it's like my mom was born there, I was born there, my grandfather was born in Fairbanks, Alaska, so it's like that's where I'm from essentially. So I didn't know any different, and we weren't going to escape. We were from there.
Sure, sure,
So
sure. Right.
it's different, but then it has that feeling because it's pretty isolated that everybody is very connected. And also, there's never like a dress code or like a fancier event because it's culturally very young. So you're like, you don't know, you never know who you're talking to. Somebody's in rain boots and a pair of jeans and they could be governor of the state, or they
Right.
could be, the person pumping gas.
Well,
So
climate
everybody
like
doesn't
that just
like,
depends such functional clothing.
also that.
I
Yeah,
mean, look,
also
there's a reason that no one's dressed that way in LA, right? Like it's 70 all the time. You can wear whatever the hell you want.
yeah, that's true. I guess that's true. But yeah, I don't know. I think people are like kind of down to earth in a way that I don't see everywhere else.
Mm,
'Cause they're like, they don't see that many people. So they're just,
right.
they want to visit, they want some social time. And it's like I've actually did a project where I rode all of the roads in Alaska. And they're like, these towns don't have like cafes or a restaurant. Everybody hangs out at the gas station,
There's
you
a
know
meeting ground, right?
or the
Like it doesn't matter
supermarket. And then
wherever
you're
it is.
there like trying to buy food for the next 100 miles. And they're like, oh, you want to have a cup of coffee with me? It's cool.
That's
I like
great.
that, but it's like, it's not quaint.
No, no, it has its own unique vibe. It's yeah, I like it. I like
Yeah.
it, but it is unique.
Mhm.
On my adventure list is a drive up to Prudhoe Bay.
Oh yeah, I've ridden that actually 3 times.
Oh my god. Like I'm
You should
looking at
check
it
it
like the
out. It's
drive's a
really cool.
challenge. Meanwhile,
You should check it out. It's really cool. You go through the Brooks Range, huge mountains. So far north, there are no trees. It looks incredible. You think you're like up in extreme high elevation, but the highest pass is like not even 5,000 feet.
oh really?
Yeah, because it's so far north, it looks really stark, but it's like it's not high. It's cool.
It's interesting. I've spent the only other place I've spent time that far north is I've spent quite a bit of time in Iceland over the last, I don't know, 10 years or so. And
Somewhat similar. Yeah,
that
but
place
not
is
so windy.
special. Yeah. No, man, it's brutal. I remember watching Hannah's documentary about her ride, and like the first day she left Reykjavik, she got on the bike at like 5:30 a.m., got off the bike at like 11:30 p.m., 26 miles. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah, it's
tough
hard.
day. Tough day. Um, with as much time that you've spent outside and at night, and especially sleeping alone in the middle of nowhere, I think a lot of people have such an innate fear of that. And there's got to be a confidence that comes from doing that a lot. I mean, is the wilderness less scary than people think, or are they completely unprepared?
It's less scary. I mean, generally, it's less scary. I think a lot of this stuff is scarier when you're sitting at home, or especially at night at home. That's when I'll wake up like with my biggest stress, where I'm like, what's going to happen? How's this going to go? And then you wake up in the morning, sun's up, and you're like, oh, everything's
Fine.
actually fine. I think that's just normal, a normal human feeling. Dark makes you like on edge. Thinking about places you aren't gives you more anxiety, but once you're actually in it, you're like, oh, I'm just sleeping. It's actually fine. And what are the things that could go wrong? Do I have a shelter somewhere where I can sleep? Because some of this, like, so I did a lot of traveling on the bike before I raced. So I kind of knew that experience, but then the racing version is that you go a lot farther, you sleep less, you carry less. You take less time for everything. So, I'm not bringing my, comfortable tent. I'm in a bivvy. And if the weather's bad, then I just have to keep going. But
Do
those are
you
just,
appreciate just the adventure trips now of like comfortable tent and slower
oh
pace?
yeah, I love it all. I wouldn't pick, I don't think I'd pick one over the other,
Well, they're
and I think
different
that,
challenges,
what's that?
different experiences altogether.
Yeah, yeah, they are. And then I mean, yeah, I guess,
Well, I think it's
like,
often people want to make them competitive, right? Of like, which one's better? That's not how it works. You're getting a different thing from both.
yeah, and then the change also helps me keep going, because I'm like, now I'm excited about racing. Now I want to do this trip. Now I want to do this girls program. Now I'm going to ride with women, and that keeps, like, I always want to ride my bike, but my approach is different, so that keeps me kind of like excited about it.
Any, I guess, what's the weirdest you've run into in the woods? Any weird lights in the sky? Are we a UFO person with as much time as you've been outside?
No,
All
I
right.
mean,
That's an interesting answer because then why
yeah,
not?
no, nothing like that. But I do, I mean, if I don't sleep for 2 nights in a row, I definitely start hallucinating a little bit.
Sure, sure. That's different.
But that's not like I'm not seeing like just phantom objects, but it's more like a tree will become a person,
Yeah,
or
shadows get a little tricky.
stuff that isn't moving starts moving. And then I know that what I'm seeing is not actually like the reality, but I'm like, well, I've been here. I know this is like my brain just doing it.
That's how I feel with mushrooms. Same answer.
Yeah, yeah, I guess it's a little
Yeah,
bit
it's
like
like,
that.
oh, so that does that now. Okay,
But probably
and then just move on.
the coolest stuff I see are the animals.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, in different like you're talking about the Great Divide route. Like last time I rode it, I saw a mountain lion at midnight.
Holy shit! I'm willing to
Wow.
bet that's a relatively close encounter.
First time I've ever seen that. Yeah, like 10 feet away, if that.
Oh man.
My light shined on its eyes, and I was like, oh shit. Because, like, at first you're like, what am I seeing? And then I was like, see the tail, see it moving. I was like, that's a mountain lion. I've never seen one before, and I don't actually know how to respond.
Yeah, other than slight panic. What
Yeah,
is the
well, because
response?
like, what are you gonna do right in this moment? And
I
then I
don't
started
know.
just like talking to, well, and then I started talking to the mountain lion, like, hey, I'm just over here. I'm not trying to bother you. Because I was like, well, at least I could show mountain lion I'm not like menacing. And
Sure.
then I was like near the top of a pass, mountain pass. So I was like, if the mountain lion starts coming towards me, I can just turn around and try to bike downhill as fast as I can. But then I started hearing like this chirping, like cheep, cheep, and that's the sound of the babies. That's what the
Oh
cubs.
no.
So then, like, I think this mountain lion was just like in between me and the babies, which is a
Sick.
terrible scenario, but also like, well, I definitely don't want the mountain lion to think I'm like,
Well, you don't want to be the in between.
I mean, I don't want to be there at all.
Oh, right. I'm just passing through, man.
But then I'm like standing here. I took a little video with my cell phone because I was like, oh my God,
May as well get it.
yeah, I was like, I want to show my wife like what I'm seeing. 'Cause she's usually there shooting stuff, but she wasn't along for this trip. And I was like, I want her to see what I'm seeing. And then I'm still standing there and I'm like, it's midnight. I'm actually 3 days into this ride and I want to go to sleep. I was I was like, I want to like get some rest. And I'm like, and now I'm kind of stuck. So then I start like just gently moving forward with my bike, like rolling it, walking, talking. And then the mountain lion like comes ahead of me and is like leading me
Oh
down the
man.
road away. So then I'm slowly walking behind, just like watching, walking, talking for like 15 minutes, following this mountain lion down the
A
road
long time.
until finally the mountain lion goes off the side of the road and then I can go downhill.
How far did you go before you decided to make camp?
Well, then I was like, okay, so this is the crazy part. This town I'm trying to get to, which is Ovando, Montana. And I've done this route. This is the fourth time. So I'm like, I know exactly what I'm getting into. But the town earlier in the summer, a woman had been riding the route. And this town's really, it's a cute little Western town. And it's where like a river run through it is filmed.
Okay.
Um, and they've got like a little town square with like a teepee and a fake wagon or in a jail. And they're really welcoming. They're like all cyclists can just camp in the town for free, and we want you to feel good here. And then earlier in the summer, a woman was killed by a grizzly bear camping in that town. And
Oh
this is like the
man.
first time this has ever happened. It was a huge tragedy. It sucks because she died, but it also sucks because then everybody's like, "Oh, you can't ride this route. It's not safe," which it generally is very safe.
That's still look, that's still a lower percentage of bad things that have happened to people than any other sports we can probably come up with.
Exactly. Like very minimal chance, but like, how people feel about fear and scary situations, then they're like, oh, I'm never going to do that. So I was like, well, I definitely can't camp because I also feel like that's disrespectful.
A bit.
Like,
I understand that.
it's like, then I'm like, oh, I can just do whatever I want, even though this woman like died earlier this
Probably
summer.
won't have two grizzly attacks.
Yeah, I was like, like the risk of it actually happening is very low, but I was like, I can't just like
Yeah,
act
that makes
like
sense.
that stuff doesn't matter. So I had called the town because I was like, well, they have one hotel. Maybe I could stay in the hotel. And they're like, oh, it's fully booked, but we're having cyclists sleep in this church that's in town. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll just get there and sleep in the church. And so then I had from Mountain Lion spot to town was another 20 miles. So I rode there and then I'm like, where the hell is this church? Like looking around for it in the dark. It's like 2 in the morning at this point. I find it and I was like, yes, got the church. I go inside and I'm like rolling my bike in, and then like some dude, I hear this voice that was like, what are you doing here? Like really spooky in the dark. I was like, whoa. I was like, hey, I saw my headlamp on. I was like, hey, I'm just a cyclist. They told me to come sleep in the church. And then he's like, oh, okay, cyclists can go to the basement. But I guess he was just like another
Oh man.
cyclist, but he freaking spooked me time. And then
Oh
he and
man.
then so then I walk down to the basement. I see him and his friend and their bikes like set up. And I was like, I'm not sleeping down here. I'm only gonna sleep for 4 hours. I'm gonna sleep upstairs and then I'll be gone before anybody even like knows I was there. What difference does it make?
Right.
So then I set up my stuff, I sleep, wake up in the morning and keep going. But what a night,
What
you're
a
like,
night, man.
okay, I was just trying to get to town to sleep in a church. Don't know where that is. See a mountain lion. This guy creeps me out, and then you're like, all right, time for bed.
Well, and right, and of all the miles and of all the nights, you have a few.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
does it lead to the confidence that like, oh well, we haven't seen anyone today. We probably won't see anyone through the night.
Oh, 100%. Yep, exactly. And I think about that too because people are afraid that, you're going to get attacked by a person or an animal while you're camping. But really, most crime is premeditated.
Hmm,
People attack people because they've made a plan to do it. They don't like find some woman riding through the woods and attack her. That's just very unusual.
now,
So I think about that.
as something I've look, an advantage of being the size I've been, right? Like, I mean, is that something that you guys talk about with like your women's retreats and all that? Is that a big fear to keeping women from taking on adventure?
I think that, even for me, this has been a thing where like the first time I rode solo from Alaska through Canada, like people would just say, "Are you safe?" And they would kind of push this like question and this doubt on me. Where I was like, well, I think I'm as safe as everybody else.
Right.
It's like I don't think it's
I mean, why
I'm
would it be
less
any
safe
less
because
safe
I'm
than
a
anyone else
woman.
in the town?
Right. And then I think, but some of these situations, like you could run into like a creep. And I have heard stories from people where it's like this guy was like kind of following me while I was riding my bike. And then I don't know, it's like you don't want to deal with that. But I guess
No.
having, something like having a spot tracker that shows your location that can add like safety where it's like your family knows where you are, or you have a way to like hit the emergency button that something's going wrong. And that's not just from like creepy people. It's also like,
No.
well, what if you fell and broke your leg?
Right.
Like it's a safety thing. Or you have a cell phone and most of the time you have service. So, or you're on a road, somebody's going to travel through if something actually bad happened. Like when I rode in Alaska, people would just come up to me and just be like, hey, just checking in. Random people I didn't know, but they're like, how are you doing? What's going on? Just to make sure everything was okay, because they're like, they know that it's remote,
Yeah.
and I think the more remote you are, the more people like kind of try to take care of you.
Makes sense, right? Like why wouldn't it build more of a sense of community when you know no one else is going to come help?
Totally. And they're also just curious. They're like, what are you doing?
Sure, sure. You're doing a
So it's
thing that people
cool.
doesn't make sense to most people.
Or they just want you to come over for dinner,
Yeah.
And that's what
And
I
share
usually get.
stories.
They're like, hey, come over, have dinner with us, because they're just curious about what you're doing, and that's fun. I've never had a bad experience, and I've ridden probably in like, I don't know, 55, 60 countries all over the world since 2008. And then that level of like experience does make me confident that like this is people are good, they actually care. Of course you have to use your best judgment. If you see a weird situation, get out of there.
Right. You got to have some spidey sense that comes with the experience, right? Of like,
Yeah.
trust that gut feeling. And even the awareness of coming into town and deciding not to camp, even though it's probably safe, and the what it could be felt as, right? Like, because
Yeah.
that red flag popped up, you have to listen.
Totally. I mean, for like your own safety or for like being a champion of what you believe in,
Right.
you kind of have to like, I always wear a helmet. I don't ride my bike without a helmet. Like, even if I don't think I'm going to crash, I just don't want to do
Well,
that.
I
I don't
don't
want that
drive
mess.
my car without my seatbelt either.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like these things are just like, that's how you do it, you know?
I mean, I've looked at all those safety devices, and I mean, that's where I've always never understood the 2A guys with the Second Amendment, like free, like the open, concealed carry stuff is like, that's why you have it. It's not because I'm preparing for bad things. It's the bike helmet. Like, I've ridden for years and I've never taken a hitter,
Right.
but I prefer that it's there.
Yeah, and also it's like, if kids see me, I want them to see me wearing a helmet. I want
Right.
them to wear helmets and think that that's a good choice, you
Yeah,
know?
TBIs are no joke. I know
Right.
Rebecca's been struggling with one for a year, and she's not an extreme downhill mountain biker.
It
She's
can
an adventure
happen.
cyclist. It happens.
Exactly. It happens. And it's like that also shouldn't stop us from doing the sport,
I
you
ate
know?
shit riding with Rebecca. Oh my god, dude. We'd gone up to Idaho, and so we went for like a 20-mile ride up her. I don't know if you've been to Idaho where she's at, but Rebecca's got this great, probably 10 miles out to where this hill starts. And the
Mhm,
hill's about as long as you'd ever like it to be,
mhm.
especially for me. And that day she was doing um, she was doing some testing. So she was doing like her 5-minute power test and then doing her 20-minute power test. And so I rode up the thing as she passes me on the 5-minute and then returned down and then passed me again on the 20-minute time trial. Uh, it was such a cool thing riding with her. On the way back, we're going through this little bit of single track, and I still have no clue what got my front tire, but just right
Oh,
off the front of the bike, like in the middle of a park. Like, it couldn't have been any less exciting of a terrain. And I was like, no clue what happened. Just trail gnomes, man.
did
Just
you
got
get
me.
hurt?
No, I'm
Well,
talking about.
then you're like, okay, it's all good.
No, you
Yeah.
got to learn how to fall. Learning how to fall is pretty critical to doing fun shit.
Oh, it happens,
Yeah.
that's part of writing. It happens.
No,
It's
it's part of
usually
life.
not catastrophic, but yeah,
Falls, failure, all of it. Like,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's part of the gig. Like, it's gonna, like, I'm not gonna make it to the end of this thing without scars anyway.
yeah.
Um, being from Alaska and being that exposed to like the wildlife and everything that you're talking about, how was your trip to Africa?
Cool.
I
I've
went for the
been
first time last year and
cool.
went to where did we go? Zimbabwe, and did like 4 days of whitewater
Oh,
rafting uh,
cool.
in Victoria Falls and stuff like that. So, how was your exposure to that wildlife?
It was good. So I went to, yeah, Kenya in June,
Okay.
for a 4-day stage race called Migration Gravel, and they bussed us out to this kind of preserve where there are zebra and antelope and elephants and cheetahs and lions and uh, all kinds of animals, water buffalo. And we saw all of the animals. It was really cool. Giraffes. We were racing about 100 miles a day, and every day was like full on race. We'd start together, and the roads were extremely rough and dusty, and it'd just be like a plume of dust, and
Oh
then
no.
chaos. And there's like just huge rocks and potholes, and it's really rugged. And people are like, from the start, like, this is the most important race of my life, because it was like the first time they've hosted this kind of race in Africa. The field is half Africans, half European and Americans. And it was awesome. I loved it, but I was like, this is wild. Like, I had like gazelles leaping across the road in front of me while I'm like racing, and I hear like helicopter overhead because that's how they move the animals. They like kind of spook them, so they like move somewhere else because
Sure.
they're like, you can't have like dangerous animals like really close to the riders.
Makes
So that's how
sense.
they
I
would move
appreciate
it.
that.
And then we'd race the stage, and then when we'd get to the finish, they'd have like, basically these army tents set up, and that's what we were sleeping in. But it was perfectly executed. Tent was set up, your bag's in it. They have like showers where, they have a system with a bucket of warm water to go
Mhm.
over your head, and then, communal dinner. And then next morning, 7 o'clock, so you start again.
What a cool experience.
Yeah, it was wild. And the Maasai are the local warriors, and they were the race marshals. So they're on like they wear like colorful blankets, and they would be on like motorcycles to like make sure people were on course. Or
Oh,
if somebody had like a flat tire, they'd like pull over to like help them.
oh, wow.
Total trip. And then at night they would have like a huge bonfire, and the Maasai would be like singing and dancing and jumping. They have this like crazy chant that they use for hunting. And it's kind of spooky, like kind of screaming, but into the night. But it was cool. Then that we could like ask them questions and like hear about their experience. It was wild.
What a
Uh,
what a crazy, as many varieties as there are to whatever this life experience can be. Being born there is
yeah.
such a different starting point.
Totally. And we
Yeah.
would see it, because like if you're riding 100 miles, you see a lot along the way. So we would pass through these pretty dusty villages with like just a whole line of like little children in their school costumes just waving and cheering for us. It was, I mean, like, yeah, it's also in some ways like pretty sad because you're like, well, they don't have opportunities, but like the best we can do is come over for this race because it's way harder for them to come to our races, and they still do it, but
Yep.
they have to get visas, they have to get funding, they have to get all this stuff. These are amazing athletes. So it's like, yeah, it's like it's hard for me to get here, but it's way easier for me to make the trip than for them to do it. So it was cool.
So with more of that, like as the opportunities come, like I'm sure that your year get planned out with what rides are available and who wants to have you now is what a cool thing that you've built.
Oh my gosh, and it's just ramping up.
I'm
I always think
sure.
it's gonna slow down, but then
No,
I'm
dude.
going back to Africa this weekend.
Oh my
I
God,
have a
this
friend, and
weekend.
this is cool. It's like I'm not actually making money off of this, but if somebody's like, "I'll buy you a plane ticket," I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'll definitely
Yeah,
come."
you're the
That's
same like still
expensive.
dirtbag adventure nerd.
Oh yeah, of
That like
course.
the fact that anyone's offering a free trip somewhere, you're like, that's good enough. Sounds great.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, do I think they're gonna like pay me to go to their race in Africa? No. I mean, the race I'm doing this weekend, there's no entry fee. They're like, please donate, $100 to this cycling team in Uganda so that these people can come to the race. I'm like, that's badass.
And not only that, like, I mean, you getting to come over and maybe even sharing some of the light, right? Like that's such a cool portion of it.
Yeah, and also like there's still the thing of, this race is 1,700 miles through South Africa and Namibia,
Okay. All
self-supported.
right. A
Uh,
self-supported 1700 miles through Namibian desert.
I've never been to Namibia, first of all.
The
I've
only
heard
the
it's
last people that were
awesome.
there was like they filmed Mad Max Fury Road. That's it.
Yeah, it's like sand, the wide open expanses. Yeah, so I'm like, I just want to see it. I have like some friends that are racing, and so I get to go like race against them. Like all this stuff's cool. Yeah, I'm really tired, but I'm like, I asked my wife about it because she was like, I was like, we've been traveling so much. I'm like, it's up to you whether we do this. And she's like, if we don't do it, you'll just be thinking about it,
Right.
wishing you were there, and it's the first year of the race. So it's like, nobody knows how this is going to go. And I love that. I love like the unknown. And then we're all kind of doing it together for the first time. There's nothing like that.
Yo, I love every part of that. Like everything of that makes me so stoked on that you're one of the people leading the charge on bike packing and adventure and all those things. And man, it's accessible. Like it
Yeah.
isn't the high-end expensive thing that I think people want to believe it is. I mean, it can be. And that's one of the things I also love about it, right? I like all the gear and
Oh
whatnot.
yeah, they make amazing stuff, but basically like, yeah, you need a bike, but you could really do it with pretty much any bike. You need a way to sleep outside. You got to find food and water. I mean, those things like that's more than running shoes,
Yep.
but I don't know. Like I was a
Yeah, but you
runner.
can go so much further.
Easier to carry stuff on a bike.
Yep.
Exactly. Like you can travel longer distance. You don't have to carry as much on your body. It's easier on your body. And everybody learned how to ride a bike as a kid. So like people relate to that. They see you coming through and they're like, yeah, that's awesome.
Now,
Because it's like something we all do.
with the gear on it and like prepping for an adventure like that, do you enjoy the like trying to optimize your kit?
I don't enjoy it, but I want it all to work. And when it does work, I'm so pumped. But like, yeah, I don't like love digging into gear stuff, but I love having stuff that works the best for me. So I'm always experimenting. I'm like, okay, is this going to be better? Is that better? So race to race, it's like, what do you actually need? And then figuring out how I'm going to work that out. But like, yeah, if I could snap my fingers and it was all ready to go with the best stuff for me, I would be so much happier than thinking about it.
Right.
I don't like
Yeah, I'm
that.
sure you're over that part. That part's lost
I
its
just
thrill.
like, oh, like, and then I'm like, what do I actually need? How do I make this work? Where am I going to fit it all? And then you get out there and realize you made a mistake.
Ugh.
You're like, oh shit, I'm going to be out here for like another 2 weeks. And
Without a
this
rain jacket. This is excellent.
choice, or I lose something along the way. Like I'm like
Oh man.
riding and it gets dark, and then I realize I lost my headlamp. You're like, oh,
As a thing we've done before.
I'm like, oh, this is not good. And then you have to find another one, or you have a crazy mechanical and you're like, where am I going to get this fixed?
What
Is
type
there
of
a
crazy
shop?
mechanicals have you run into? Because they're like I said, they're not crazy technical trails, right?
Sometimes they are.
Okay.
I do a wide range. So I go everything from
Sure.
like pure road to, rugged single track. The thing I mostly am concerned about is keeping air in my tires. Because most of the other stuff, if it somewhat breaks, it still goes.
Yeah, I mean, you can transfer it to a single speed worst case scenario.
Yeah, single speed, your shifting's not great, your brakes are worn out, something is making crazy amount of noise, you lose something,
You can
my
always you
signal's
can lose a
low.
few spokes before we're in real trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's wobbly, but it still like
Yep.
clears the frame, spins. But air in your tires, that's one where it's like, well, you don't really want to ride on the rim, not for
Well,
like the next 1,400 miles.
no, that one's one of those that'll short-term solution. Like that
Right.
one,
Well, yeah.
you ruin the rim and then what?
And then what? Yeah, exactly. So this stuff, it's mostly air in the tires, but like little things you learn, like, oh, you should bring a spare derailleur hanger. It's like a little aluminum piece
Mhm.
because like if you ding your derailleur, that piece, they've
Nothing
designed it
shifts.
so that can bend or break. So you don't break all of your shifting, but there are over 100 different kinds.
Right.
So
You're
you're not
not
going to
gonna
go
find it in
to the
town.
bike shop and just find the one you need. Little things like that. Like I try to keep the repair kit like basically the size of my fist.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, I've got quick links, derailleur hanger, I've got spare sealant, multi-tool, brake pads, chain lube, like
Do
a
you carry a
little.
tube? Like an emergency
Yes.
tube? Yeah,
Yep,
of
I
course,
do.
right?
Yeah, because I mean, like, if you don't, and then you're really SOL. But then sometimes I've been like, recently, these are on trips, not races, where I'm like, I've been carrying like these tubes around for so long. When I finally do have a problem, there's a huge hole in it.
They've just been rotting through.
Oh no. And then I also have like a patch kit.
Oh
And
god, you have to
super
check
too.
my toolkit. Like these were made to save me. They're supposed to be fine forever.
No, now I'm like, oh, I better keep these tubes in like the boxes they come in so they're not just like getting ripped.
No, it's too much to carry.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I did this road race in Spain. I was riding through like a tunnel at 2 in the morning. It's super dark, but I have lights, but I didn't see this massive pothole. And I'm cruising downhill, and then I like slam down on this huge pothole, double flat
Oh
immediately.
no.
Totally ripped tubes, like
Yeah,
torn.
two pinch flats.
Yeah. And then the like tires were ripped. I was like,
I
oh,
have one on the back of my road bike currently.
what? What? I was like, well, I'm in this tunnel. It's actually raining outside, so I'm like grateful I'm in the tunnel. And then I'm like on the side of the road for an hour, like trying. And then I realized, oh, my pump is like not really working. And I was like, oh man, I had like I had brought like a CO2 to be fast, so like a little cartridge to pump
Mm-hmm.
up my tires if it was like, oh, I just want to be quick. And so I finally like use that, get enough air in the tires so it's like the consistency of like a beach ball.
Oh no.
Then I just kept going. And then I was like, all right, I gotta find a bike shop. Then I think like 50 miles down the road the next morning, there is a bike shop. It was opening an hour later, so I just waited out front. And then
Just set up
I
tent
was
and lay
like,
down for a while.
I I hope to God they have like some tires. And it happened to be a Specialized dealer, which is like my bike sponsor. And I was like, thank God. And so then I get like new tires, new tubes, spare tubes, a new pump. I was like, yeah. But then like, yeah, something went seriously wrong. But really, like the main thing I was like, I really hope like I don't have to go backtrack because I'd passed like a
Oh,
bike shop in the town like the night before. And I was like, well, I really hope I don't have to backtrack. And then I'm just thrilled that yeah, I lost probably 4 hours. I slept like a lot less because I was like, I already lost all this time. So then I'm like majorly hallucinating. But I was just so thrilled that like yeah, this it's such a boost to have things like in a positive direction. You're like, yes, now I can actually just ride my bike instead of
what's
worrying about everything else. That's like,
what's the worst backtrack you've had to make?
oh man, I haven't I haven't ever actually had to go back. Oh, only short ones. I think one time I got out of town and then realized like I thought I had left my inhaler because I have really bad asthma in the
Okay.
previous town. And I was like, I can't get another one. But that was like 5 miles back. Then I get back there and I'd actually just put it in a different pocket.
That's a very me thing to do. I'm glad to know that that exists with other people besides myself.
Or I've like laid down. Like this was my first race in Israel. I lay down on the side of the trail, sleeping, wake up a few hours later in the dark, and then an hour later, I'm getting into the town I'd gone through the night before and realized I went backwards.
Oh no.
These things happen.
Yeah,
It's just
and you have a computer.
it's dark, you're disoriented,
Yep.
it wasn't directional. I like I went back, and then all you can do is just like
Giggle.
laugh and turn around and go do it again. So you just did that same stretch of trail 3 times.
Hmm.
But everybody does this stuff.
Yep.
It's like you think, oh, I would never do that. And then you
Of
find
course.
yourself, and you're like, or my GPS like froze. I rode down a road 6 miles extra because it showed I was like on course, but it had frozen. And you're like, oh,
I did I entered my first gravel event a couple weeks ago, and it was like 110 miles, so it'd be my first century, and was almost 10,000 feet of climbing.
dang, that's a big one.
I finished some 90 or so minutes after anyone else who finished the 100. And
Good for
oh,
you.
my only goal was like, if we can still make any forward progress whatsoever, we continue on. The goal was like, which will quit first? And does my body quit because I was ill prepared and didn't fuel and didn't do these things and I pushed too far when I could have understood the bigger goal?
Hmm.
Or did I let my ego get caught and realize like I needed it out? But
Yeah.
it's really interesting to me in those situations how your brain will start trying to find outs.
Ha.
So mine did it. My computer wasn't working right, like at 52 miles in, and there was like that was the 50-mile route they could bail off and end.
Yeah.
So I don't have the route on my computer, but it's relatively marked on the ground by like blue spray paint.
Yeah.
And I remember like, oh, I don't think I should continue. Like it'll be dangerous. And then like I'll be so behind on the course and looking at all these excuses
Yeah.
instead of like, but my body still works. Like you have a cell phone, call for help. Like you're
Right.
lost. It's not the end of the world.
Right.
But I have like, you have to have those ups and downs during all of it. Those parts where you run into what are we doing?
I think for me, I'm like, I know that I will regret quitting so much, like after it's over, that I do everything I can to not quit, because I'm like, and I know that I'm going to have to come back and do it again. And then I'm like,
You're
"Oh
already
my god, I've already
16 days
done
into
like a
this.
quarter of this. I'm gonna have to redo all of this work." like, and I'm gonna have to make a plan to come back, and I'm gonna have to get everything together to do that. If I've already like partway into this, I should just stick with it, and I know it'll get better, and it always does. It always gets better.
It
But
always
yeah,
does.
there is that feeling where, you're so excited, you decide you're going to do this thing, you've been dreaming about it, and then you get like a quarter halfway in and you're like, this is horrible.
This is
Why did
horrible.
I ever think this was a good idea? You know, and then you're like, what was I thinking? But then, you kind of ride that out and see how it goes.
Man, it always crests the other way. Like
It
the
does.
up is always bigger because you'll have those moments too. Like for me, I've really leaned into when those moments pop up of like, holy shit, how cool is this? And look at the sunrise and the gratitude stuff really kick in. Like I
Yeah.
lean into it to make
Yeah.
up for
The
like
hard.
whatever little bit of noise the other voice is trying to make.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then like appreciate that, but also, realize like you're not going to absorb everything, but you're there. That's good enough. It's like this is beautiful. I'm here right now. I wouldn't be here otherwise. This is awesome.
Right. And it's a choice. Like
Always,
nobody fucking asked.
always.
No one ordered me to go do any of this.
Nobody made you do it and nobody actually cares.
No one
You're
cares.
doing
That's the
it.
other big portion, right? That no one cares.
They might be like, good job, that was amazing, but you can't like expect them to like relate to the feeling of it, but maybe they see you did it and then they're encouraged to go do their own version. And I get that a lot, and I'm actually like, that's pretty cool. They're like, I was like following your race and saw you were like going through these hard things, and then it was pouring rain at home and I still went out for a 2-hour bike ride, and they wouldn't have done it. And I'm like, that made their day better.
Yep.
That's cool. Like not everything has to be epic, but you do, like when you look out the window and think, oh, I'm not going to do it, go do it anyway.
Yep.
Just go do it. You'll feel better about yourself. Your day will be better that you like did something you'll remember.
Now, do you have any type of like like, so when you are downtime and home and more recovery, like do you have a morning routine that you kind of practice or anything?
Not too much. If I have more time, I'll do more yoga. I try to
Okay.
do like pretty minimal core work because it keeps me healthy. I cook, and instead of like buying food at
Eating.
the gas station, I make my own salad dressing, and I make like eggs and salad and rice for breakfast. And I live in Tucson, so I can sit outside and eat it in the winter. I'm like, this is the best. Just stuff like that. But
You've done your time in the dark north?
yeah, I mean, I love Alaska, but I'm like, the winters there, like, yeah, it's fun to be in the snow, but it's dark. It's
Yeah.
so dark. It's
I've,
hard to have energy when it's like that.
yeah, I've been over to Iceland a few times for like New Year's and same type of deal where you kind of get like gray. It's not like it's pretty daylight for 4 hours. It's gray.
'Cause it's overcast.
Yeah, of course
Really.
it is. And so like, man, it's tough because you can easily, especially there with the 6 hour time difference and like a little bit of jet lag, you can totally fuck up and miss the daylight
Totally.
and be like, ah, what happened? It's
Gone.
dark
Yeah, it's
again.
gone. That's hard. For me, that's really hard. I'm like just dragging,
Well, and we know
so
how much that it sets circadian rhythm and all these other things from being in the sun and how that we're supposed to operate a bit in the elements. Like
yeah,
there's something too that always being in climate control, always being in a chair, always being in these comfortable settings. Like again, why would your body ever be prepared for when things are hard? And I've always found that like hard things are either going to come or I can go find them. And I would rather choose the stress.
true. Yeah, that's true. And then more hard things will come when you're out there that
Yep,
you're not expecting.
sure. And they're problems to solve, right? Like that's the
Exactly.
challenge of it is
Yeah, it
creative
doesn't have to
problem
be a
solving.
crushing thing. It's just part of the experience. Totally.
What are your go-to foods, drinks? Like are you fueling with everything?
Totally. Yeah. I go through phases with this stuff. And I mean, actually, I'm trying this thing recently. So I did a podcast, I think last week, where the guy was like, oh, yeah, I used to have terrible asthma, and then I stopped eating dairy, and it really cleared up my lungs because
Interesting.
I had really bad asthma. And then I usually eat almost all dairy while I'm
Okay.
racing. Like, I get like pint of like Haagen-Dazs, and then I just let it melt,
Oh,
and then
it's easy
drink
calories
it.
that get in.
Yeah, and it's delicious.
Yo, chewing protein bars sucks.
Yeah. So I'm like, before, like when I raced across the US, I mostly drank milk. And I started with like chocolate milk, and then I was pretty sick of the sugar. So I just started drinking like quarts of like whole milk.
Just for calories.
Yeah. And it also, like, something about the milk, it's like brings your legs back from the dead.
Well, it's glucose. I mean, like all of those things are in there.
Yeah. Protein, fat, everything. It's a little hard on the stomach. You're like,
Sure.
oh, that's disgusting.
Well, you're in the woods. Who
But I
matters if
would
you're
feel
farting
like
in the woods by
20
yourself? Who
minutes
cares?
later feel great,
Yeah.
So I was like, I just drink milk, and now I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be drinking milk
Well, I
because
imagine.
that's
Look,
what I'm breathing.
I
So,
imagine the bivy at the end of your Great Divide ride. Like the inside of it needs some love anyway. Like
oh,
that's
everything's
pretty.
disgusting.
Everything's
The first time I
disgusting.
raced it, I didn't shower for 17 days. I mean, like, I was such a wild animal. I was like, I'm not wasting time showering. Now I'm like, oh, like, if I shower,
You've
I'll feel
already
a lot
softened in
better.
your
I'll have
approach.
like way fewer like gross problems, like
Okay.
feeling disgusting, But I mean, like, these are the things, it's like biking. I don't ever wear a chamois, like no
Yeah.
padding, because it's
Oh,
gross.
really?
Never.
Whoa! Just iron ass the whole way.
Yep.
Well done. What
But
what
then
saddle
think
are you
about
riding? And send me a link because I bet it better be fuck. I'll just buy
Yeah,
it.
no, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I mean, it's not like a couch, but it's got a little cushion. I ride in
Okay.
a fun saddle. Uh, but people are like, how could you do that? But then you think about, well, if you have a chamois and you're sweating in it, people get like crazy saddle sores.
Oh yeah. I mean, again, as I've never done a multi-day attempt in the same gear, that
That's the
makes a lot
thing.
of sense. It's a whole
Exactly. Like,
different ball game.
you can't. I mean, I don't know. You could carry two pairs of shorts, but then then after day two, they're both dirty.
Yeah, but if you're gonna pack simply like if you're just gonna be able to comfortably ride in lycra bottoms, you could
Yeah.
pack 3 of those and they require no space. Chamois and bibs take up tons of room.
Oh, I just have one pair of shorts because then I could
Okay.
like rinse them out and they dry fast because they're lycra, you know? Or like a pair of like just kind of loose regular shorts if I'm like mountain biking. Because mostly I'm like, I love being minimal, but then yeah, you still, even if you're trying to be minimal, there's only so much space on your bike.
Yep.
Then I have to carry like electronics. I have to like charge my GPS, I have to charge my phone, I have to charge my shifting. I'm carrying more electronics than like anything else.
Do you carry solar? Or are you never in anywhere long enough?
I'm probably not there long
That's
enough.
kind of what I figured.
And yeah, it's like, how do you set that up on your bike for it to be like,
On your
because I'm only
backpack's the
sleeping in the
only thing I could
dark,
think.
I have a
Yeah.
dynamo hub. This
Oh, so you're charging it from the front hub. Got it.
Yeah, but it's like, how much power do you get? Not enough. The main thing for that is consistent lighting.
Mhm.
Because like otherwise, like the
Well, those
batteries
would be gone.
required for lights are huge.
Yeah.
So as long as I'm riding like 6 miles an hour, I have a consistent beam.
So what is your current setup? Or I'm sure it changes per route.
Yeah, exactly. I have different
Um,
bikes for different rides. So like Arizona Trail, full suspension mountain bike.
so you're riding specialized. I have a S-Works Evo.
Yeah, so it's the Epic Evo.
Yes. Okay. I think I
That's what you
have.
have.
Yeah, I think I have the same bike.
It is awesome.
It's such an incredible bike. I had a really hard time not using it for this gravel ride that I'm doing when I have a
Yeah.
actual gravel bike that weighs 10 pounds less.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. But man, that bike is so nice.
Yep. So that's like for my roughest stuff. That's what I use. I used to have the stump jumper, but I mean, and I did like a 300-mile Arizona Trail time trial on that. And then by the end of it, my shoulders were more sore than anything else from pushing it because the bike weighed 35 pounds with nothing on it. And I was like, oh, this is going to be so awesome for descending, but it was just way too heavy.
Too
That
taxing on the up
the
for the
Epic
ladder on the
Evo, I think,
down.
is like 24 pounds or
It's a
something.
crazy light
It's
bike.
a crazy bike.
There'll never be a point where that bike is what's limiting something I should be able to do.
Yeah, well, it's
I'm the
not
problem.
trendy, that's for sure. But
Right.
then even with that, so I'm doing this Arizona Trail 830 miles. It's extremely technical. So like climbing, I'm not climbing 6 miles an hour. So then I had to bring like mountain bike lights with batteries that are like, a pound.
Oh,
Because and then I'm
that's a
like,
heavy pound, man.
yeah, and then it like dies, and I can't charge that off my Dynamo Hub. I actually have to plan to like every third night try to get to a hotel to charge stuff. But I did carry, I think, three of those batteries because I was like, I can't know when I'm gonna get there.
And now, do you book everything just on the fly?
Yeah, because you can't
You
prearrange
never know.
anything. You're not allowed to.
Oh man, is it just such a luxury to go to like a supported event that you're like, I just have to ride the 100 miles today, and then like everything's there and taken care
Yeah,
of?
totally.
Great.
It's awesome. I'm like, oh my God, they have like little things of gummy bears that you just grab and eat. That's so cool.
Now
Uh,
you said you've done like the 24 hours. So is that just like total
yeah,
number of miles in a 24-hour attempt, like on a loop?
yeah, those are supported. So they do a loop. The one I did was 24 hours full Pueblo, just out of Tucson. I think it's like the biggest one in the country. And it's a 16 or 17-mile loop, single track. There are like 1,000 people out there.
Oh man.
And then you can do it like I did it solo, but you could also have like a relay team. So then
Right.
you get like all kinds of different teams. It's like
It's got to
kids
be
out there.
packed, right? Like that trail's got to be pretty active for
Yeah.
that 24
That
hours.
was like the hardest thing about it was like it's single track. So then you're constantly like working out how to pass people or be passed.
Oh,
You have to like communicate. You're like, hey, coming up behind you, I'll pass you whenever it's a good time. Don't worry about it. Because also it's like lined with cactus. So you don't want people to like go into a cactus. So
no.
you have to wait till there's like a little pull out where they can like pull over, so you could like get ahead. But that was definitely the trickiest part. So you do laps. I did 17, which is just nuts. All through the day and night. And then, you can have a support crew. So I had my wife and a friend who would just like meet me at the start of every lap. And then they would just have like, Coke or whatever, where they're like
So I mean, what are you coming around like every 2 hours ish?
hour and a half,
Yeah, 90 minutes.
hour
Okay.
20 to hour and a half. Yep. So then I would be like, and then think about what you could eat or drink while you're doing something like that.
You can eat whatever you want. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, but what's gonna sit well in your
Yeah.
stomach?
Yeah, that part's a trick, eh? Like I know based on my rides, and so I'm a bigger guy. I'm about 6 foot 240. Uh
Uh-huh.
down from my biggest at like 318 when I was competing.
Oh, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, it was time to go. There was no reason to keep carrying it around. Like if I was gonna be that big, it was because I was gonna be very strong and doing a thing.
Yeah.
And if I'm not going to be strong enough and physically capable to do the thing anymore, why am I carrying that extra mass around?
Wow. I've never heard of anybody with that perception of
Well,
weight.
like it ended, right? Like the career competing ended and the knee went out. And so now on to other things. I don't want to continue chasing metrics with a fake knee that I already figured out when I was healthy. Let's go see what else we can do. And,
Totally. Hmm.
and in the, kind of have a white belt mentality of what can I learn from stuff.
Yeah.
I'm so bad at endurance things based on like my previous career choice,
Right.
for athletics that like there's nothing but progress.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's also like a good place to
Oh,
be.
it's the best. I just want all
Everything
the
I do
beginner
is
gains from
good.
this. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
want all the beginner gains of like, holy shit, like in 8 weeks of this, when I didn't want to spend an hour a day on the bike, I can now do, 380 miles rides in a week simply from just showing up and continuing to pedal.
Yep.
And it's like, you can get better at it. It doesn't matter that you're not built for it. Like I couldn't be any less built for endurance. And so, man, you can do it. And what a fun, interesting way it is. And also, I love the mental side of how it slows things down for me with ADD and anything else, that I get a much different focus and the world gets small again. And the only problem to solve is just go that way.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I'm a bit all over the place, which
Wow.
is one of the things I really love. I would imagine I'm speaking to the choir. This is the thing you've decided to fall in love with isn't the normal route or sane thing that people get into.
Yeah.
Man, I love getting to know other crazy people that love to do shit. And This has been a conversation I've wanted to have a long time. I have followed and loved it. I had Lachlan Morton on the podcast, a year or so ago, and just always inspired by people that seem to be doing life and everything a different way. And
Yeah. And I hope we're all having some fun. You
why
know,
not?
that's kind of the main thing. It's like, why do this if it's not fun for you? Like, yeah, there are going to be hard parts, but you should have this overall feeling of like, I actually get to do this and it's awesome. And I feel like both Rebecca and Lachlan are a lot like that. And I really appreciate that attitude because what's the point otherwise?
What's the point, dude? Both look, whether I spend this life waiting for the opportunity to find me or if I go chase all my dreams, like I end up
Mhm.
dead either way. Like the outcome's the same. And so like there's not a risk.
So grim.
Well, but I mean, like I find relief in that of like whether I live some life committed to this greater idea or I chase my dreams and my passions and put it on the line for it. Like I don't get an extra medal for being a martyr to the system.
Totally,
And
totally
so
makes
fuck it.
sense. Yeah.
You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
it's
As long
true.
as people want to hear me talk about stuff or do any of that, I will happily continue to try to do it.
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. Well, when is your ride? It's
The
coming up.
22nd.
Cool.
This is my last like real heavy week in the saddle.
Cool.
So kind of what I've ramped up to this week. I'll do 240 miles this week.
Yep. Here,
And
you got
then
this in the bag, no problem.
I'm pretty excited about the first 6 hours, 100 miles in the dark. We're going to start at midnight. The idea is to finish before midnight. So
Nice. You're
24,
gonna finish way sooner than that.
I think so too. I
Yep,
think
you
so too.
definitely are. You're gonna get halfway through it and be like, "Oh my God, that's over so fast." You're gonna get halfway through it before it's light,
Right.
which is cool. That'll feel good.
Yeah, that's something I'm looking forward to. That essentially
Yeah.
I've ridden the second half of it. So
Okay.
middle of it's about Columbia,
Oh no,
Missouri.
then you don't get to see the part you haven't ridden?
That is a bit of a problem.
Whatever, it's fine. Go back and see it later.
Exactly. It's
All
Missouri. I
good.
know what
It's
it
all
looks like. All of this ride looks pretty similar.
similar. Yeah.
It's pretty.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It'll be good. You'll have fun.
man, yeah. Yeah. The biggest thing I've figured out is like I have to fuel. I'm just so
Yeah, you
poor.
have to eat like it's your job, especially you, because you're way
Yeah.
bigger than me.
Yeah. So my 143 miles came in at like 11,000 calories.
Yeah. You gotta eat a lot of food
Yeah.
and stuff you like, but that's cool. Yeah. What are
Like
you
it's a
thinking
day.
to eat?
Um, so when I did the 110-mile ride with all the elevation, it kicked my ass way more than the 143 that was
A
flat.
lot of climbing. Yeah, that
And
takes a lot more out
it
of
was
you.
hot. So it was like 90 outside. So me staying hydrated and not cramping was was a bit of a trick. So like
Yeah.
anytime my heart got over 145, like I'd start cramping.
Yeah.
It's like, so we have to slow down. That's fine. We'll walk.
Yeah.
Whatever. But I packed like protein bars and I packed some sandwiches. I packed way too much protein. It requires too much energy to process
Yeah.
during an event like that.
Yeah.
We're not really dealing with like your muscles deteriorating. It's too short of an effort.
You just have to eat something.
I just need fuel. So I need to just stick with carbs, fats, stay there. Chocolate bars, candy bars, peanut butter, oats. Basically, if I was going to have a meal, it would be like ground meat and rice. Stuff that's already basically pre-chewed.
Yeah.
So that and just as much water as I can consume. I'm sure I will have a pretty good time after this month that I don't want to drink any hydration products.
Yeah, because they're sweet.
Yeah, just get over it.
Yeah.
I try to find like more of the orange flavored or like lemon lime stuff.
Yep. Yeah. Then you're like, it's just one day.
That's it. It's a day, dude.
That was my first endurance event. Like, I think 2 hours in, it just clicked in my brain where I was like, oh, I have to eat like it's my job.
Yep.
Because there's nothing else that's going to do it. You can't get into a huge hole. It just every hour you got to keep eating.
Yep.
And then you're like, what am I going to eat? Anything that looks appetizing at all.
I remember I did a couple days on like the Appalachian Trail a few years ago, and it was on the Georgia end of it. And so like we ran into some people camping that night that were going to finish the next day that had started up in Maine.
Mhm.
Talking to them, like one of the girls, she was saying, is like, yeah, when I started, I had all these free dried meals and all this type of stuff to like cook and set up and do camp. And she's like, now it's chips and peanut butter on tortillas.
Yep. And then she's like making little wraps out of those three.
Of those three things, doesn't care. It's crunchy, salty, sweet. Move on with your life.
Just keep eating.
She's like, the rest of it takes too much time. I don't want to sit there and bother.
Yeah, whatever.
I'll
It's
have a
all
good meal in
good.
a week. It'll be fine.
Yeah, you can eat something good afterward.
Right.
Exactly. It's
Dude,
not forever.
I can't thank you enough. Tell me more about the women's stuff and where can people find information or any of those type
Oh,
of
yeah.
things?
Yeah, I mean, most of the stuff you can just find on my Instagram, which is just my name. I have like probably a dozen videos from different people on YouTube sharing stories from different races, from my girls program, from things I've done, which I love that I've been able to do that. But really, next year I'll host 3 women's bikepacking rallies. The first is in the Canary Islands in January. Second is in Slovenia in September, 3rd in Arizona. They are all free to
Oh,
go to.
wow.
We ride with 50 women from around the world, bike packing, and it's a total blast. And so I'll just put that up on Instagram.
Yeah, that's incredible, dude.
I love it so much. This is the second year we've done that. I work with this company, Komoot, that's a navigation app, but basically they just help me like do registration because I'm like, I want more women to feel like they could do this sport. And to be on an adventure that's not a race. It's not competitive. Do your own
No, it's
thing.
the adventure.
Yeah, it's just for fun. But I don't give them anything besides like start here with everybody together and try to get to the finishers party a week later.
Well,
But instead of like
that
grabbing your
makes
own
arranging it easier.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then I'll do a girls program in Arizona in the spring. That's with 12 and 13-year-olds. We ride together for 6 weeks to do a bike packing trip.
Wow. How big a bike tracking trip at the end of it?
Last year in Arizona, we went, I think, something like 60 miles
Okay.
over 2 days. It was super chill. It's for girls that are like not athletes.
Yeah, I've never been on bikes.
Yeah,
it's an
one of them
exposure trip.
didn't know how to ride a bike when we started. We taught her.
That's
I
so
can't believe she signed up. And so this one's supported from Specialized, where they send all the bikes. We work with low-income students and they get to keep the bikes.
no way.
Cool. And they can come back the next year as like student mentors. It's so cool. I've done this 4 years, 3 in Alaska and now in Arizona. A friend took over my Alaska program, so they're still doing it up there. But
Dude,
stuff like this, like I didn't start riding until I was 20. I
right.
would have loved to do that. So it's like a few weeks out of the year, I can like have the time to put the stuff on and then, go back to my racing or whatever. But it keeps me kind of in the zone of like why this is important. Because, at some point you're like, who cares how many days in a row I can ride 250 miles? Like,
Well, at some point it'll stop meaning as much to you.
it already has.
Right.
Where I'm like, it's cool. I love my personal experience. I also love sharing like video and photos, but there's more to it than that. You actually have to create opportunities to get people on bikes, and that's how they're going to do it,
I love that. I think the ripples that you leave in the pond, right, are a bit more important.
And then that like keeps me energized, so I like it. We'll see how long this lasts.
Well, I mean, is that so? I mean, with the power of all this, right, of creating content and kind of, I mean, there weren't professional jobs of this
Right.
before, like in a relatively short time span, which now and for a period of time, there will be. Like, this is a thing someone now can grow up to do.
Yeah.
Which is really, really cool.
It is. And you can make whatever you want out of it. You can do more things that you don't get paid for, but you do them because you love it.
Yep.
And somebody helps you, like that kind of stuff. And then it's like, yeah, like somebody else might just give me bikes and that helps me too. But, it's like you could do more than just that.
Right. Now, do you see yourself kind of moving more that direction with putting on more events to kind of have people going and less chasing FKTs?
But they're all gonna be free.
Yeah.
And it's like, well,
how you can do stuff that makes great money and makes an impact that's free for participants.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I already am doing more. You know,
Right.
every year I add on like 2 or 3. Never a race though. I'll never a sponsor. I'll never host a race. And then I
Yeah.
say stuff like that, and then I do it the
You know,
next year.
never's a long time, Lael.
I
Never's
said I would
way too
never do
long at this
that,
point.
and then 1 year later, I'm doing the exact thing that I said I would never do. So don't hold me to
It
it.
may
But
be a bit more of a direction point for you than you realize.
I guess the thing is, I feel like so much of this sport is focused on competition, and I like competing, but I also like the other parts of it. I
Right.
like personal challenges, I like adventures, I like getting your family and your friends into it and making people feel like they can be part of it without any idea of like the race aspect. They don't have to be like timed, you
Yeah.
know?
And for me, you know, I don't want to compete anymore. At least not in the sense that I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you know, maybe that same feeling I can get, whether that's motivating people. And like the thing I loved about competing is that I was confident to show up and perform when the time counted,
Yep.
do a thing that I was really prepared to do.
Uh-huh.
And so I can translate that to anything. I don't care about where I finish on the podium.
Yeah.
You know, it's the battle with me.
And for me, it's like competing is so much easier than the other stuff. I actually like love that part. Like I love riding. I love being out there. That's like breathing. Organizing something is like an absolute nightmare for
There's
me.
people that are great at that the way you are at riding bikes. Just hook up with them.
Yeah. I'm like, I like having the ideas, but I don't
No,
actually.
but you can do that. Like so for you, like me business wise, like I've got an apparel company, a podcast, and we run a YouTube channel and a coffee company, and I have a mentorship group, a variety of things.
Yeah.
And one of the things I do well is I have a really great team behind me that allows me to create.
Yeah.
And they do the operation side of like, how do we make a real thing out of this, whatever you just came up with?
Yeah. That's really cool. That's
So
really cool.
that exists.
It's
Like you
inspiring.
can do that.
So I
And that
don't
way you
rip
can
all
stay
my hair
focused on
out.
being on Lael.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
know what I
I'm
mean? Like,
what I want to do. I just want to do the parts I love.
and you can. There's other people that will happily do the others.
Oh,
So if
well,
if at any point you need help with organizing or any of those things, reach out. I will happily try to make some connections to people I know that are very good at those things.
I appreciate
No
that.
worries at all.
Appreciate
And that
that.
way I look at it like I want to stay focused on like the 5% of my business that requires me.
Yeah.
Because there's a
Mhm.
lot of stuff that if that 5% isn't good, then none of the other 95 matters.
Right.
And so let me stay focused on the part that only I can do when we can't outsource.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
So, man, sky's the limit, dude. I don't think there's anything if you want to do it that you won't be able to.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I'm just super grateful for what I get to do and uh, you know, just trying not to get burned out.
Man,
I do every year though, but then I get a little rest, go for some hikes, have good breakfast, and then I'm back on. So everything's good.
how,
Everything's really good.
I guess the only other question I was thinking about when you're on your big ride, like how long till you're in the zone? Is that one of the reasons for like riding down to it is like by the time you already crossed the line, you're there?
I'm usually looking forward to being like 12 hours, 24 hours into these rides because and not so much for me personally, but like starting races, there's so much nervous energy and people are so afraid and there's this kind of thing where it's just like it almost makes you feel a little nauseous to be around.
Yeah.
So then I know by the time I'm like 12 hours or 24 hours and there won't be anybody around.
Right.
And so I'm
You're
like
just in it.
looking forward to that. I'm
Yeah.
like, all right, then I'll just be kind of like doing my thing.
Dude, honored and such a joy.
Yeah. Great talking with you.
Thank you so much. And I will have links and everything. And as we get the show out, I will send whatever we have to you.
Awesome. Sounds
Have a
great.
good one and enjoy your trip to Africa.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye bye.